Welcome to the For Love and Money podcast, the show where business and social purpose meet to inspire a movement for positive change. Here's your host, Carolyn Butler-Madden.
Welcome to episode 99. Can you believe this? I'm recording this episode on Guymigal and Garigal country, and I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land and pay my respects to elders past and present. What does it actually look like when purpose isn't a department, a report, or a line in the annual review, but the operating system of an entire business? That is the question at the heart of today's conversation. My guest is Sara King, General Manager of Purpose at Intrepid Travel, one of the world's most recognised purpose-led businesses. Sara is responsible for delivering Intrepid's environmental, social and governance commitments across a remarkable scope: climate action, gender equality, modern slavery, reconciliation, animal welfare and the Intrepid Foundation. She's also the person driving Intrepid's B Corp certification and recertification under increasingly rigorous new standards. Before Intrepid, Sara spent 12 years at the International Finance Corporation, part of the World Bank Group, including a posting to Vanuatu where she designed a national investment incentive scheme for tourism. She grew up as what she calls a third culture kid across Asia, never quite in one culture or another, and that outward-looking lens has shaped everything about how she works and why. What I love about this conversation, one of the many things, is that Sara doesn't talk about purpose as aspiration. She talks about it as infrastructure. Purpose embedded in the board scorecard. Purpose as the guide when a profitable product, Antarctica, had to go. Purpose as the reason 220 people applied for a single role. And there's a poetic quality to this conversation for me. My very first guest on this show, back at episode 2, was Geoff Manchester, Manch, co-founder of Intrepid. And here we are at episode 99, one away from a milestone, and I'm back in the Intrepid world again. Some relationships just keep giving you something worth talking about. I cannot wait to share this episode with you. Enjoy. Sara, welcome to the For Love and Money podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here.
Thanks for having me, Carolyn.
I can't wait to hear your answer to this question, which is one I ask everyone, which is, when you think about business or when you think about the purpose of business, is there a role for love?
What an interesting question. I think love absolutely plays a role in business, although you probably wouldn't find many CEOs saying that, but potentially even more in purpose-led businesses as well. And maybe the way I would frame it is that I think it ignites passion in people when they're working for a purpose-led business and values alignment as well. So I think if you really believe in the higher power or the higher purpose of a business, then you're likely to be more engaged. You can bring your whole self to work and contribute more. And I definitely see that on a daily basis at Intrepid. And I think people are searching for that these days. You know, in the past, they might have found that in more traditional institutions, but especially the younger generation really yearning for more meaning at work. So yes, I would say yes.
And I love that you answer that not as a hypothetical, but, you know, from the perspective of what you see at Intrepid.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, you just have a much more vibrant workplace when people are passionate about what they do. And I think that rubs off on everybody. And so I think it, you know, maybe that's what we should all be striving for instead of the bottom line. Maybe we need to measure that in some way.
Hell yes. Hell yes. Because it's energy, isn't it? It's everything is like energy that fuels everyone else around you, and that's got to fuel success.
Absolutely. It is definitely a flywheel for sure.
So, Sara, I would love if you could share a bit of your backstory, just those key points that brought you to where you are today as GM, General Manager of Purpose at Intrepid Travel.
I think for me, it goes back quite far in terms of, why I am where I am today. And I was fortunate enough to actually grow up overseas as in Asia with my family. And they have a phrase, I guess, originated back then called third culture kid, where you grow up not in your own culture, not really in the culture of the place you live in, but in a third culture of other expatriates. And so for me, I grew up in that way, and I think it really formed a way of thinking about the world that is quite unique to people who are fortunate to grow up in that way. And it makes you think about your place in the world. And often third culture kids, have a real empathy about what happens across the world as well, and carry that through. And so I think that really has, not dictated, but I guess formed a lot of my working life and how I've navigated my choices in my working life. And starting off, I worked at the ABC and was working in news, so I was really connected to the world in that way, but felt I wasn't really in it enough. And so then went off and did a volunteer year through the Youth Ambassador program and ended up working for the World Bank for 12 years, very much kind of in that cross-cultural development context, and then made my way back to Australia, and we'd done a project through my workplace with Intrepid. So that's how I learned about them. So I think it's always informed my way of working, trying to, be a global citizen and actually contribute back that way.
I love that. It's so interesting. And I've never heard of that phrase, third culture kids, but I'm a third culture kid. I also grew up in Asia. So that's
There you
really
go.
fascinating. Which part of Asia?
Indonesia mostly.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Interesting. And I guess, when you're in a family that's used to travel, it's outward looking, it sees the greater world, and yeah, fascinating. So, Sara, I would love for you to share. Regular followers of this podcast will know that I've done several Intrepid episodes with Match. He was my first guest, and Annette Sharp, and a special on a First Nations cultural immersion tour. But for those who perhaps haven't heard some of those episodes, I'd love if you could share a bit about Intrepid, why it exists, what the organisation is, but why it exists, and what is the change it is there to create.
Absolutely. So Intrepid is a 35-year-old Australian business that takes small group adventures, travellers on small group adventures, immersive experiences all over the world. So last year we carried over 300,000 travellers to over 100 destinations. And we have around 1,000 itineraries that we take travellers on. So we have a really amazing, unique business that's homegrown in Australia. And Match, who you've had on, is one of the co-founders, along with Daryl Wade as well. And they're leaders in this industry that have really been quite maverick in terms of their approach to sustainability and championing sustainability through the business for a long time. So our mission is to create positive change through the joy of travel. And I want to emphasize that there is a joyful element to it. So it's not, we try and educate and engage our customers in a way that's obviously not too dictatorial, but that they can actually enjoy it as well. And so, they've really, Daryl and Match have really championed sustainability the whole way through the business, and have done several, leading things that have, continued to play a big role in the business, from climate action to the work that we've done in the foundation as well.
Yeah, and it feels like that foundational work they've done. I love how you describe it as a maverick approach, because, some of the examples I've heard of what they have done is truly maverick, contra to expectations, and yet true to who they are. And it seems that they have attracted like-minded people who care about similar things, who are taking the mantle and continuing and evolving it and growing, which is so exciting to see. So in our recent interview for the case study that we're writing on Intrepid, you shared that purpose at Intrepid is not treated as a peripheral concept or a communications device. It is central to how the business operates. Can you expand a bit on this?
Absolutely. So it is a core part of what we do as a business, and we have a long-term strategy in the business to get us to 2030, which is our next big milestone. And our purpose and impact is really embedded into that core within the strategy. And the majority of our time at Intrepid is actually working on the core within the business. And that's not just myself, but it's actually many leaders across the business. And I have a unique role in terms of I'm quite a facilitator of others actually creating impact. And that's a tenet really of what we do as a business. It's not the exclusivity of our team at all. It's actually our role is to facilitate, set targets, engage people, and actually embed it across the whole business.
I love that on so many levels, because so often purpose is siloed. And you hear leaders go, "Oh yes, that's our purpose work or our purpose department." And the fact that and you've said purpose is everyone's job, but you facilitate that, I think shows real leadership in this. This is what it looks like when you are leading with a higher purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I get a real sense of joy when I see others, that when the kind of penny drops for others and they start to generate ideas and come to the table. For example, recently we've got a great new GM in Nepal, and he's been generating all of these wonderful ideas. He's just come to us and said, "We've got these tea houses we go to on our Annapurna trek, but we have bottled water. Can we replace the water with water filters so they can actually benefit from clean water as well as our customers?" So that's been a little micro project that we've worked on with him recently. So yeah, it's just really wonderful when you actually can work with others and actually help facilitate their impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've also said that purpose is a guide for how you do things, and obviously you're giving ownership to your people to come up with, wonderful ideas like that. But you also mentioned that it is a guide for how decisions are made. Can you sort of expand on that a little bit?
Absolutely. So we have quite a unique leadership structure, I guess. Our senior C-suite meet every month and discuss and debate, big decisions, I guess, across the business. And often when those decisions are made, the impact of those decisions, the environmental or social impact is part of that decision-making matrix. And so and that's again up to people within the business to kind of put forward that. So it's definitely expected and part of decision making at the highest level, as well as at the board as well. We've got the board regularly engages and reviews our impact and ensures that we're actually meeting our ambitious goals. And I think when we were discussing the case study, we talked about the concept of patient capital, and I kind of laughed and I said, actually it's more like impatient capital because they view purpose and impact targets like they do the financial targets. And if we don't make progress, then our wider scorecard metrics aren't met. So it's really embedded across that wider scorecard we have as a business every year, and the expectations around that are managed at the highest level.
So you're talking about the tension between purpose and profit. So let's go there, because I think this is such an interesting way that you approach it. And I've heard it in the past. I think Manch said, we refer to purpose and profit as a package deal. So can you explain how the company approaches the tension of the two together? And I'm thinking specifically of the story that you shared with us about Antarctica.
Yes, absolutely. So As I said, it's part of the decision-making matrix in terms of when we make our decisions around product and the places where we invest and not invest. And, when we were discussing and reviewing our operations in Antarctica, for example, it was definitely part of the consideration set of that board discussion in terms of, the carbon emissions and the footprint that the ship was actually bringing down to Antarctica. And so we decided to exit the operations down there, although we are still selling in, but we're selling into a ship that has better management of the environment and cleaner fuel practices in place. So, we're trying to always manage these tensions all of the time. And particularly in the climate space, it's very challenging because right now there aren't a lot of other options available. We don't have large scale SAF, for example, with flying and aviation emissions. So we're, where we can, pulling flights off trips and also reorienting our marketing to actually market more to short haul tourists, in the short term. But at the same time, we are a business and we need to grow as well. So it's just constant kind of dance, I guess, around how we balance that purpose and profit mix.
Yeah, and I was really interested when you said that, balancing the benefits of, taking people to Antarctica and, the awareness of what's happening and the education and then becoming champions versus the environmental cost. That you made that very difficult decision, on a product that was going really well. But then you also said that once, you pulled your obviously you've said you're working with somebody else, but when you pulled your product, there was no reduction in, well, that means that we reduce our revenue targets.
No, absolutely not. They get increased every year.
Impatient capital. There you go.
That's right. We've got to look for other sources of revenue and actually and other sources of creating value, I guess, as well. So, and I think that there is we're in the middle of climate risk disclosures at the moment, and there is this interesting mix of opportunities as well. And how do you create value? And we've pivoted from having carbon offsetting to actually having a decarbonisation fund with the intent that we actually can create more value within our products and our value chain around decarbonisation. So that can look like an EV transfer, from the airport to starting the trip in Colombo in Sri Lanka, for example, or having a solar farm on our Daintree accommodation. So I think it's about, again, where you take away, but where you can add on opportunity as well. And again, constantly trying to, use those levers where you can.
And that feels like a systems redesign rather than a sustainability tweak.
Absolutely. It's actually a business strategy. Even, it actually has to tie into the business strategy. And that example I mentioned, so with our new climate targets, for example, that has had to tie into our business strategy of growing our domestic market because, because you have to use all of these other levers like marketing, like, where are you going to design and grow product, where are you going to invest in offices and people, and all of those levers have to be in place for you to kind of change your business strategy. So it almost, you need to align both the climate and carbon targets with what you're doing as a business if you're actually going to make any substantial, change long term. So it has to be the systems and it has to be the business strategy approach.
It's so interesting. And so what you're saying is it is changing the growth profile of the company to shift you thinking more locally?
Correct. Yes. So it's a mix. I mean, we're still doing kind of taking Australians to Asia, for example, still doing the long haul, which has been the majority of our product. But we want to shift that blend, I guess, to actually taking Australians within Australia because we know that the short haul flights are less carbon intensive. I mean, they're still both flying, but we're not going to be a walking company completely, for example.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
have
yeah.
to actually keep doing what we're doing, but we are trying to redesign our products, to actually be less carbon intensive for the longer term. And that's one way we can use our business strategy to do that.
Which is really brave because you've got a really ambitious growth target, haven't you?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, we're coming out of COVID. We're a $350 million business. We're probably going to be over $1 billion business this year. So, and then
Congratulations.
1.3 by 2030. So it's a huge growth, and so constantly managing the impacts of that growth, I guess, is part of my job, and but also, as I said, seeing where the opportunities might be as well.
And those opportunities, it goes back to what we were saying in the beginning, that when you're attracting more intrepid people and, they bring a higher level of energy to their work and, it opens up innovation possibilities, new ways of thinking. And that's so exciting. That's the untapped potential of so many traditional businesses.
Absolutely. And I think it's so interesting, when you actually meet people who come into working for Intrepid, because they bring such a diverse skill set. They might have got, an undergraduate degree in biology, but they might be working in the sales team, or they might have an archaeology degree and they're working in the people team. And I just think that if businesses can actually tap into all of that knowledge and value that so many people bring in different ways, then, as you said, like, businesses are going to be more innovative, they're going to be more future proofed, and have more engagement across the board. So I think, we're thinking about people in one particular box. I think people need to kind of move beyond that and think about, ways to create value.
Yeah, and you're leading the charge on that. And when you think, what do they say? The new generation coming through are going to have at least 5 careers because they have to be agile and businesses have to be agile to respond to what's happening. So when you think about Intrepid's evolution, decisions like discontinuing the Antarctic tours, moving from carbon offsets to decarbonisation strategies, what question or questions did the organisation start asking that it wasn't asking before, do you think?
Well, that's a great question. I think that again, this tie into the business strategy is really essential. Like, are we using our business strategy to drive impact? And when you do that, it does unlock value again. And so we've done this a number of times. So another example is, as we were coming out of COVID, we were looking at the foundation, and the Intrepid Foundation has been around for 20 years and has had a long track record of impact. But it had been focused on one particular impact area, which was jobs and livelihoods. And we thought, okay, we could definitely be broader with the impact that we create. And we went back to our people in our offices and said, well, what are the issues that you think are important in the communities you live in? And we got such a broad range of different ideas from that. And then we obviously looked at our products too, and we said, okay, well, potentially if we actually align our impact partners with our products, then we'll have the scale that we need. So I think it's about looking at what products you have, how you can actually embed impact into those products to get the scale that you want to reach, in terms of your ambitions, because it's only through the product and the volume that you will actually reach, that you could potentially unlock more impact within your business.
Before we dive back in, a quick word from me. If you're enjoying this conversation, you might want to know that I work with leaders and organisations on how purpose becomes a powerful driver of trust, performance, and resilience. I speak at leadership conferences and company events about how purpose shows up where it matters most, in leadership, in culture, and in strategy, helping organisations grow with clarity and confidence in a changing world. You can find out more at my website, carolynbutlermadden.com. Now, back to the episode. Yeah, so what I'm hearing from you on that is, it comes down to your strategy, but your strategy is formed by your purpose. It's driven by your purpose. So if you are truly serving that purpose and, I guess, uplifting the level of at which you serve it as you evolve as a business, then you have to start asking yourself challenging questions about how you do things and
Absolutely.
how you shift.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that the expectations around that also, that you should grow, your impact should grow as you grow as a business. So it's not, again, this siloed thing. It's actually, almost an ethos or responsibility as a business. As you grow, you need to create more positive change. So it's that mindset within the business that's there.
Yeah. And it's moving from, how do we operate sustainably to how do we grow responsibly to an even higher level of how do we contribute regeneratively. And
Yes, absolutely. And I think then that's why it's so important to listen to your people and in sustainability terms, your stakeholders, I guess. But, for us, we're so fortunate to have people who live and work in the places we take our customers to. And so they know what issues are most relevant to them and their communities and their destinations. And so they can, by empowering them, then you can actually make a difference in those places. So I think going back to that kind of principle of sustainability around listening to your stakeholders, then I think, again, it's such an essential part of getting it right.
absolutely. So I want to zero in on your business model as a leverage point, because you've talked about your vertically integrated model, employing people locally rather than just acting as an agency. And that seems to be fundamental to a key part of your impact. Can you explain what this is? And also, I'd love to know, was it originally a commercial choice or an impact choice?
That's a great question. So the model essentially is that we design and create our products, our tours, our multi-day tours in our source markets. So in Australia, in the UK, and the US is where we source our travellers. And then when these travellers are on their trips, they go to our destinations where we have operational offices. They're called destination management companies. So these companies actually operate our trips, they source our product, they hire our tour guides, and the people who run the office as well as the tour guides, mostly locally hired people. And so they have a real connection and understanding of the tourism sector within their, destination. From the beginning, it has probably been a mix of both local and expatriate, but I think over time it was a real intentional shift because we saw the value of hiring locally and the impact that also had on our traveller experience and their connection to the destination as well.
You shared when we interviewed you, you shared a story of a ripple effect. Do you remember the story in India? And you talked about. Can you
Yes.
share that?
Yeah, absolutely. So Intrepid is quite a humble company, and when I first started, I kind of over the last few years, I've reached out to a lot of our DMCs to ask them for stories around, the way that we have worked in destinations. So because we actually, package things together, so we package the transportation and the accommodation and the cooking class or the village visit all together in the itineraries, we've got suppliers, thousands of suppliers all over the world. And I was lucky enough to go to India last year on a women's expedition with some journalists. And we stayed in this accommodation, which was a beautiful kind of, mid-range accommodation, which had a real community feel to it. And I sat down with the owner and he said, oh, I've been working with Intrepid for 15 years. He said, my son was a tour guide for you. We started as a 2-room guest house, but now we're 40 rooms. And with the knowledge that he got from working for Intrepid, he brought that back to our business and our business has grown. And because of that, he also brought back the ethos that you need to do more as a business to take care of community. So we hire people from the village next door, we train them, they can stay here and work, we pay for their health and education. And he just went on and on. And I was so blown away by that story. And I think, when I have reached out across the whole business, we have a huge collection of these stories where we have operated in places for a long time, and people's small micro businesses have really grown alongside ours. And that has a huge economic impact in places where a lot of these businesses don't often get access to markets. They don't have the marketing, resources to reach international tourists. They don't have, often have the business training, for example. But our people know them, they have relationships with them, they guide them, and they're able to grow as we grow. So I think that is really kind of a big part of our secret sauces at Intrepid, is that local impact that we create.
There's no doubt about it. I think my first Intrepid tour was a few years ago to Morocco, and just, some of the tours that we went to women-owned cafes, in areas that didn't have impact, were just, you could see the ripple effect there. But also it's just a reflection of the people that are part of Intrepid. Like I absolutely loved our tour guide, Mohammed. He just went over and above in every possible way. I was traveling with my daughter, and afterwards I sent a message to Manch just raving about him, and he came back and he said, "Thank you so much. That was lovely." But, that's true of most of our tour guides. And I'm like, yes, but he was special. But everybody must think that, right? And he was amazing. And, he even took us to his family's place for tea and cakes and stuff like that.
That does happen. It's amazing. A lot of them do that, actually. They're so generous. It's, incredible.
Gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. So you, again, in our interview, you described Intrepid as an entrepreneurial business and comfortable with change. Is that cultural DNA essential for the impact that you're having, particularly that systemic impact, do you think?
I think it is essential, because I think that often, when you're creating programs or trying to do, difficult projects in places where there's certain challenges, you do need a certain agility and ability to adapt and change as you do things. So I think that definitely, helps create more impact. And I think it's that entrepreneurial, as I said, everyone's responsibility, and we have quite a flat structure as well. And so it's that exchange of ideas, it's that collaboration that makes ideas better as well. And so I think it's that combination that certainly, drives the impact.
Do you hire differently because of purpose?
We certainly ensure that we are communicating our purpose to our future hires, front and center, and explaining that, we often all have some kind of role to play. It's not in addition to your job, it's part of your job. And so I think that does set us apart a little bit differently from other businesses. And it means we also attract people who are particularly interested and passionate, as I said before, as well. So I think it does. It definitely helps you to create a culture within the business that seems to work well, even though we've got a huge amount of diversity across the business. But that really ties a lot of our teams together.
Yeah, right. And, you mentioned someone with an archaeology background in people and culture. So that seems to reflect that entrepreneurial and open spirit as well, to hire differently, so you don't have to fit people into rigid boxes.
Absolutely. Yes, definitely. And then we've got a big push at the moment to, for people to grow within the business as well, and to try different roles, and, a lot of support around that as well. So I think there's definitely a desire for, to nurture that talent within the business.
And it must be very easy to attract people. I know every time I've seen an Intrepid role advertised, there's a mad rush. Like people in my network are like,
Absolutely. There was a recent role that had over 220 applicants. So it is,
and
yeah,
high quality applicants.
absolutely. Yes, yes. So we felt very spoilt for choice often.
Amazing. What about at executive level? What capabilities do you have to look for or nurture at an executive level?
Yeah, I think you need, again, a diverse set of experiences and the ability to speak both business language and purpose language as well. So, it's really encouraged for you to share ideas on other parts of the business and, grow your knowledge of different parts of the business. So curiosity, love of learning, different experiences, that's all part of what you need to have, and that's that senior level.
Yeah. Yeah. So, customer experience. I love how Intrepid invites customers to be part of the change you're making, as opposed to many companies are like, how do we communicate the good that we're doing and use it as a marketing, tool? But I recently read, I think you posted actually on LinkedIn, an article in Intrepid's publication, The Good Times, on 10 new purposeful ways to travel responsibly. Trips that let you connect with local communities and give back to the places you visit. Can you share a couple of examples of these trips with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the part of what we do is that experiential travel component. And so we do really try and search for ways to create experiences out of, environmental and social causes within destinations, because it's a great kind of conduit for people to learn about the destination. And I'll give you an example. Actually, I took my family on a Borneo family trip, which I highly, highly recommend, not only for the experiences, but as a working mum, it was wonderful to have to not organise anything for anyone else and just enjoy myself as well. So that's definitely a winner. So on this Borneo trip, for example, we were part of going to a turtle hatchery and actually the kids learning about the impact of climate change on the turtles, and for them to see the turtles hatch in the sand. Obviously we didn't touch them or anything, but it was quite an interactive experience because they were able to kind of see that journey that the turtles take, and it wasn't visiting a zoo or anything like that, which we don't do, but it was really actually in educating the kids and giving them that hands-on understanding of the turtles' habitats and actually seeing them release into the sea as well. So it creates lasting memories for people, I think, and that's something, I guess, where we all want to have connection with each other and connection with the places that we visit. And I think having those hands-on experiences can really help you to embed those memories.
It's just wonderful. And I'll include in the show notes a link to that article so listeners can see some of those wonderful, wonderful experiences. Influence beyond Intrepid and your operations. Where do you see Intrepid's responsibility extending beyond its own operations into advocacy or sector influence?
Yeah, we have, like, for a long time, actually played quite a big role in advocacy and have done a number of initiatives. And I think we definitely feel like there is a sense of responsibility we have to respond to challenges or issues. And we're often asked for support with certain topics or around education. And so it's kind of a natural extension sometimes of that work we do when businesses come to us and say, can you help us with living wage, or can you help us with modern slavery? So it's kind of going beyond that to create, whether it's within an industry setting or whether it's from a consumer lens, how do we use our product and our services to actually extend that So a good example is in the US last year, we created an activism trip, which is in response to the US national park funding cuts. And that was a good example of an issue that really intersected with our business over there. So this was when President Trump kind of revoked funding for national parks. And so we wanted to respond to that because it's our product, it's our backyard over there. And so the team created trips that actually hosted activists who were able to kind of express their voices and of this issue and to rally others around it. And the trip sold out in like 10 minutes because people were really engaged. And I think, again, it speaks to people's need for more meaning, and for businesses to play a role in that. So part of that was also giving funding to our national park partners over there as well and helping to bridge some of those gaps. So I think, again, you can have a shared, benefit across whether it's, engaging consumers all the way to supporting causes. You've just got to do it in the right way.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. As we start to bring this to a close, I'd love you to share how important has B Corp been in helping you develop as a business? And I'm asking that question, thinking about listeners who are in organizations going, yeah, this is inspiring, it's amazing, it's wonderful, but how do we even start that process? So can you sort of talk to us a little bit about B Corp and the role it's played within Intrepid?
Yes. Absolutely. So B Corp's been really essential to driving that impact and creating that culture, I think, across the business of accountability. So we got certified back in 2018 and we've done a number of recertifications since then. What it does is really provide that constant kind of push around new opportunities, areas that you can improve on, and that peer kind of benchmarking element too, which can be so beneficial in business to kind of push you to do more as well. So I think if you're able to get the buy-in, at, again, very senior level for B Corp and really make it part of the company's DNA, then it can be an extremely useful tool to kind of pushing you to improve and do better. It's really about continuous improvement and having accountability. And that it's getting, that accountability piece is even improving too, because they're moving to third-party auditing and minimum standards across B Corp. And we're doing the new certification this year as well. So I think will continue to demonstrate value to business, particularly as kind of, regulation and reporting requirements kind of intersect with and cross over to the voluntary kind of space, which is what's happening. Then it can really help you to get ready for that reporting requirement that might be coming down the line for you as well.
Absolutely. And I think as well, it's, even beyond the impact within society and on the planet, it's just good business rigor, isn't it? It's like any business, small, medium, maybe like small, medium businesses who are looking to establish a really sound business. It's got that rigor behind it, doesn't it, to help you actually create a business that is structurally sound and as well as impactful.
Absolutely. And I think it forces you to really look at the gaps you have as well and work cross-functionally in a business, which is really hard sometimes. We were like, for example, we had a meeting the other day. We're writing a responsible communications policy, which is part of the new standards. And, we had legal there, we had marketing, we had PR, we had ourselves, and, everyone speaks different language and, trying to align everyone. But it's so beneficial, when you can actually do it and get that process and consensus around these types of issues. Because I think the other thing is like issues for businesses are becoming more complex. You look at AI or other issues, greenwashing and, geopolitical issues, and it does require cross-functional, collaboration in the business to deal with a lot of these issues. So again, it gets you in that space of working with others to solve problems. And I think if businesses can do that better, then that's going to really support so many different areas of the business.
100%. And with the new standards where purpose is the centrifugal force as well, and there's a lot more rigor across the different areas, it's going to be even stronger, I think.
Yes, I think so too.
And harder.
And harder.
I know, we just recertified under the old standard. I'm like, oh God, here we go in a couple of years' time. Sara, thank you so much for generously sharing your time yet again and sharing, the Intrepid story. It really provides this flag for where we can go as businesses. And I think it goes beyond inspiration. It just shows like this is a pathway that you can follow. So thank you. I would love you to close this episode with Sara's dream. So if you could achieve your dream over the next 5 years with what you're trying to do through your work and wider efforts, what might that dream look like?
Wow. I think for me, it's about, as we grow as a business, it's about really growing in a way that's inclusive and extends that impact to even more people. And I just think there's so many more communities that we can support through our business. There's so many more people we can engage and get ideas from. And I think it's about harnessing all of that to really extend that impact as we grow.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the For Love and Money podcast. If you'd like to take a deeper dive into the purpose movement, visit us at thecauseeffect.com.au. And remember, doing good is good for business. So if you're not doing good, then what are you doing?